It is my great pleasure today to introduce you to our keynote speaker for today. His name is Dr. Bryan Porter. He is the Associate Dean of Graduate School and a Professor of Psychology at Old Dominion University. His talk today is titled The Promise of Autonomous Vehicles to Assist an Aging Population, Opportunities, Challenges, and a Reality Check. This is a great presentation. I know it'll be a great presentation, but also great because of the tour that we're going to have this afternoon, looking at M-City, which is a connected and automated vehicle test bed.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you, David, and thank you, Beth, and thank you all the partners for inviting me here. Thank you for giving me a tour later. Thank you for the sun to blind my audience. I appreciate that. I've never had that happen. Thank you for putting pressure on me to be great. Wonderful. Again, David and I know each other, I guess, 10 years now. We did a presentation together in Athens. So among the ruins, we got to know each other, and here we are 10 years later. Again, thank you. I have the pleasure of, in 25 minutes, maybe a little less, 25 minutes giving everything you need to know about autonomous vehicles. Ready? Not going to happen. I have a really wonderful job of trying to give you things that have been giving me headaches and that are bothering me, so hopefully it'll bother you too. So then I'll turn it over to my technology crew and they will solve all your problems in the next session. So I'm in the most enviable position that I possibly can be in. By the way, if you like any of these pictures, I have references for them if you want them. Unfortunately, I haven't taken them all myself, but you know, the promise of autonomous vehicles, right? And so many people that I've talked to over this conference have said to me, so do you study autonomous vehicles? And I say, well, no, I haven't. Well, what are you? Well, I'm a behavioral scientist that's done a lot of things with behavioral interventions in the community. I work with cops, engineers, who else do I work with? The media, other colleagues, and so forth. So again, Bryan, why are you doing this? And I'm doing this because I've become disturbed. I'm in a maelstrom. If you know Salvador Dali, this is his maelstrom picture. This is how I feel when I think about autonomous vehicles, particularly from a behavioral science perspective. To me, it has become alarming at how quickly the industry is moving towards putting them into the market and onto the roadways. I am not anti-technology, for the record. Okay? Please, not for the record. But what I am concerned about is when we are just in a head-spin rush to be first, to put something on the roadways that we haven't had proven technology yet. And we know what the problems are, we being the behavioral scientists, engineers in this room, and so forth. But that is not being communicated to the public, and it is not being communicated by the industry. Not very well. And this is where I am. And just to let you know, I used to have an alert service on my email when new things came through on this topic. It was so overwhelming every morning when I walked into school that I had to just dump it into a saved folder. I could not look at it anymore. So today I look at my email. Of course, you all know about Uber in Pittsburgh, right? I hope so. Pittsburgh, Uber, yeah. I won't go into there. And so there are some, yes, they released 4 autonomous vehicles, right? But they had drivers in them, and there was even a near-miss mistake of a parked car, right? Parked truck in the back. And they had well-mapped streets, so it's not like it was just self-driving cars in the middle of nowhere, but it made a splash. And you had to read deep to kind of hear the caveats. Oh, by the way, just today's news. You know Google's coming after Michigan. Did you read that? Oh, yes, Google's upset with your law that seems to constrain self-driving development to whom? The OEMs in the world, and there's language in Michigan's law that Google finds offensive, and so Google today, or yesterday, but reported today in this clip service that overwhelms me every morning, is coming after Michigan. There it is. It is something that's changing so daily, so quickly, it's so hard to keep track of, and one of the current projects that I'm dealing with now is to try to put all this into a perspective that hey, I can understand, that's good, but also that I can communicate with others and perhaps figure out a way that we can not let the industry forget about what our talents are. So my presentation today, very briefly, and probably very unsatisfactorily for getting like solid answers, I want to let you know kind of why I think it's important that people like me that aren't in the industry are standing up and saying, wait a minute. So I want to talk about that. And of course, some promises and some cautions that people don't talk about enough. And then at the end, I'll offer kind of where I think we need to go, what we don't know. But you know what? There are people in this room that study this technology, and I hope if there's time that you will be able to say, no, you know what, Bryan, you forgot this, and that's great, I'll take notes, I'm learning. And then the rest of you could chime in as well. That's my purpose today. So, my anchor, all right? What does farmland for sheep have to do with anything, right? Actually, it has a lot to do with our roadways. It has to do with what's called the commons. I did a lot of environmental research. I link everything back really to, why are we meddling with people's business? Because we have public space. And the public space should be governed by the public. We have a say in what Google puts on our roads. We have a say in whether Uber can put a self-driving car in Pittsburgh. We have a say in these things. We as a community, we are enamored with the technology. But I don't think we're just equally enamored with, wait a minute, what are you putting on our roads that we are going to have to interact with? Because you know what? We're going to have a mixed environment for the next 20 to 30 years, if not longer. Okay? So just saying, let's do self-driving, that's too simplistic for the complex public commons that we have to manage. We have a say, and we should be exercising it. But unless you didn't know what the odds are against us, how many of you knew that back in March, the Senate Commission, I forget the commission name, Commerce, Science, and Transportation, convened a hearing where they had representatives from Google and Lyft, and I forget the other two industries, and then one lone psychologist engineer, human factors engineer, who was the voice of, but wait a minute. So she was against, that was Dr. Cummings on the far left there, she was against the gentleman to her right, all about government, you need to ease up on the regulations so we can test on where? Your public roads. And needless to say, this committee was very supportive of industry and didn't really listen to Dr. Cummings very much. All right? And if you also haven't heard too, NHTSA has or will soon, maybe those in the room know, issue that the computer is equal to the driver, which is a step that has to happen. Most regulation says you have to have a driver, which usually means human. NHTSA either has or will soon issue something, from what I've heard, that the computer can be the driver, not the human. And when that happens, that's going to ease up on the regulations to, again, let people test where? On our public roads. All right. Let's talk about the promises. And if you recognize this, this is a blind older gentleman, perfect case study, right, for a Google car. He is, I don't know his name, but he is premiered in Google's online ad for their little pod car. It has no front seat, no controls, no steering wheel, no pedals. Oh yeah, by the way, Google at that hearing I mentioned argued that we don't need any more pilot testing. We're ready to go to market. That's a direct quote. You can hear it on the web if you want. And what Google is intending, and others, including Ford and their marketing, they don't want any steering wheel or any pedals in the car. That's where they're going, okay? And so this is an example of their little two-seater that drives around different people, and the promise, of course, is for what? What is their, did I knock that over? Am I like so animated that I knocked it? It just fell. It is just so impressed that it just fell out of its chair. Invisible Google representative. Anybody from Google here? Yeah, not like I would stop what I was saying anyway. All right. If you ask them what is their motive, their number one motive is safety, right? And this is the thing that drives me crazy. And you've all heard it. Humans are terrible. We cause 94% of all crashes. Have you ever asked where do they get that stat from? Anybody? Or you just swallow it, right? So I asked, and there are a few sources, including NHTSA in 2015, that talks about some of the latest data. But of course, I want to know, is that really a fair number? And here is their NHTSA's release about, you all know that in 2015 we had an increase in crashes. Let me go ahead and show that graph up there. You're not going to see it in the back, I'm sorry, but if you look at the red bar on the far right, you'll see it went up, unless you're blinded by the sun. Yeah, okay. I'm getting saluted. I appreciate that. Anyway, it went up in 2015, and it went up 8.1% from the year before, which is freaking everybody else out because they're saying 8.1 8% increase is the worst we've had since 1966. Oh my gosh. But if you look at it, yeah, it's a big increase, but again, in context over the past decade or two, it's not terrible. It's not good. We don't want to increase deaths, but it's not terrible. And there are good explanations why. Some have come from this university. Savac and Umtree and others who documented that the economy has a role and so forth. There are reasons for this bump up, distraction. But here's the thing. NHTSA has used this increase to argue that we need new strategies. And one of those new strategies, what do you think? What do you think we need? More technology, more self-driving, more autonomy. So they're actually saying that we now have to do new stuff. Oh my gosh, it's time to now look at self-driving. I just wanted to put everything in context. Are we so bad? Yeah, humans are certainly, humans are dangerous. Certainly we cause a lot of crashes. Certainly we do. But there's two things I want to bring up on that before I move on. First of all, we've been blaming the human driver forever. One of the very earliest UTCs, although they didn't call it that, was at Yale University in the late 1930s. And in 1939, Yale University created the Bureau of Traffic Research, or Street Traffic Research, because they were so concerned about humans and cars and killing people. All right? Hey, sound familiar? And one of the earliest publications in 1939 absolutely demonstrated, yeah, humans are a problem. They also found that they called it the normal driver because one of the hypotheses back in the late 30s was it's the same people killing everybody and crashing. It's just a small group of people, not everybody. And this 1939 paper showed that, well, actually, very few people have more than one crash, so it's everybody. It's a normal driving problem. Now, we know that crashes are rare, don't we? We know that they're rare. We know that they're, so it's not uncommon to say, well, most of us have had only one crash. They didn't talk about that. Let me also offer something else. Any of you who've done multivariate statistics know that there are many contributing factors that go into a model for traffic safety. So when you say the driver is the number one cause, the 94%, you're basically saying it's a main effect. Well, guess what? Go back to the 1940s with Kurt Levine, another psychologist, and health belief models have begun to adapt on this too. Behavior does not occur in main effect situations. Behavior is the result of a person, which is P, and his or her environment, which is E. You cannot understand human behavior without also looking at his or her context and environment. There are interactions. And so just to say, and I looked at their reports, they kind of go through the crash reports, and they look at the final cause before the crash, and oh my gosh, the person swerved wrong, or oh my gosh, the person wasn't paying attention, or oh my gosh, the person was speeding, all bad things. But they don't look at how those things interact with the other systems and other environment around them. And by the way, they certainly don't look at cultural differences either. So it's too simple to say it's a human problem, and in Google's conclusion, we are so bad, we don't even need to be part of the system. No more partnership with human, you bad. That's what the industry is telling us. And as human researchers, we have to ask, is driving required to be a social behavior? Does it have to be social to be driving on the public roads? My answer is yeah. It's public roads, public space, public commons. There are traffic cultural differences. Can you imagine a poor programmer, which by the way, isn't programmers, aren't they human? So human behavior is going to design the cars that are going to take away the human. It's still a human problem. Can you imagine them trying to design the algorithms, even with AI and other things, to drive in Norfolk, Virginia versus Ann Arbor, Michigan, versus Shanghai, China, versus Sao Paulo, Brazil, and you get the idea. Can you imagine? And to do it correctly and accurately that we can put these vehicles on the road safely. One day we will. I'm not that much of a cynic. I'm just trying to get people to go, wait a minute, really, next year? Seriously? Seriously? Or 2021 like Ford is saying? The other thing that people are promising, of course, is mobility and freedom, and this is where the aging society comes in. This is a direct quote from Dr. Urmson, who was that Google representative at that conference, and I know you guys won't be able to read it directly. That's okay. It'll be available for you, but I'm going to read the red for you. For people who are blind, elderly, or living with conditions that would otherwise make driving difficult or impossible, this technology offers the promise of mobility and independence that has never before been available. That really is their second purpose, in a way, for advocating for self-driving. And that's really appealing. I remember reading somewhere, I cannot find the source, I think it was a Renault CEO or something like that, who said, hey, his mother will finally be able to get out of the house again, or something like that. It's very appealing. And many of the discussions we had yesterday about getting to medical appointments, getting the needs and the community services, that couple CNN reported on that couldn't see each other, all very appealing reasons to have self-driving, of course. So I think this is a possibility. It is real, and it's something that I think we need to work on with some other caveats we'll talk about. The other thing that's being promoted with that mobility and freedom is you'll be more productive. You know, I'm looking around, and not many of you yet are looking at your phones and laptops. And I mean, don't you just wish the dang thing would be turned off and left alone? I was so happy when my battery died yesterday that I couldn't look at my phone anymore. And there are people talking about phone addiction. I think it's real, okay? So imagine if your company said, well, it's self-driving, get that report done for me. You know, I like to be in my car, crank up the music, and leave me alone, world, right? Here's the thing, another report just came out, 2016, Schottl, is that how you pronounce his name? Here at Umtree? Schottl? Oh, if he's here, I'm sorry. He and Savak just came out with another technical report where they actually looked at, in 2016, could you be productive in the car? And their analysis is no. Because most people's trips are so small and so short in duration. I mean, imagine an average commute of 10 to 19 minutes. Are you really going to pull out your computer and write that report? How many of you hate to, like, what I call hurry up and wait? I got 10 minutes to go. It's dead time, right? So imagine being expected to be productive in the office. And this is what's being promoted. And this is Auto World Megatrends magazine that, you know, certainly did a nice job reporting on could you have a mobile office or not. That's one of the promises they're saying. Of course, the third promise is interesting as well, and that's the economy. One of the applications of self-driving and automation connected vehicle, very interesting enough, is in more the commercial world. I forget which country has platoon fleets of vehicles like trucks, so the lead driver and then 2 or 3 drivers can get on his bumper and basically hit a switch, whatever they do. Again, I'm learning the technology. And those second and third drivers can just kick back. It's almost like if you're NASCAR fans, which I am, you know, Michigan's right over there, right? So you're drafting, except you're drafting with a computer pulling you. So the lead driver does all the work, the rest of the bums just sit back and, you know, drink a Coke or something. All right, that's a possibility. But here's another one, speaking of the aging society and the aging population. The same issue the Auto World I gave you had a nice article that's suggesting that one of the problems going on with the car industry now is millennials aren't buying as many cars. So one other, maybe that's a cynical reason or not, I don't know, but paying attention to the aging population and what they want, they are a very demanding consumer group. And where's my what's my car does what app person? Where is he? There he is right there. So at the National Safety Council working on what, you know, my car does what app to help seniors and others, mostly seniors and maybe teens, know what your car is doing or not, right? Well, manufacturers are paying attention to that. Well, hey, look, maybe what do seniors want? And Bloomberg apparently did some analysis. I have not seen the primary source. Has suggested, I'll read that for those that are blocked by the projector. Bloomberg has even suggested that the driverless car market could counteract failing sales numbers from younger generations, thanks to the new opportunity that the growing aging population persists. So there is a belief by some that the aging population will be the consumer of this new technology and may bring up car sales. So that's a possibility as well. All right, so if those are nice promises, which still need to be determined. And again, going back to safety real quick, when you read people say that safety is going to improve, here's the word they use, safety should improve. People use the should word a lot, and they treat that as fact. Beware of that. But we know for sure that there are certain things that aren't being emphasized here. Number one, should we even remove human control? And just very briefly, Savak and his group here at Umtree actually has done a lot behind this, which is fantastic. They argue that the person trust automation issue is not settled yet. Will people use it? Do they perceive the reliability and so forth? We already know that the current technology that demands partnership with humans isn't working very well. Think of Tesla. Humans seem to think it's automated. And by the way, reliability is bad for humans. Really high reliability, we get complacent and the machine will fix it. So we want our technology to be reliable, but the over-reliability actually makes the technology risky for humans, particularly if you have a human partnership required, as Tesla did. and that unfortunate fatal crash. And many of the automatic adaptive systems we're talking about here have a human partnership. So we haven't quite worked through yet how we best include the human in that partnership. And that's something we haven't solved yet. So now, does that mean, well, we haven't solved it, now we just need to remove the human altogether? Those are some of the debates going on. People aren't talking about that so much. And certainly the whole question, will people be willing to surrender your control? Would you be willing to surrender your control in the vehicle and just take the crash if the crash is going to come? Maybe I should take a poll on camera. How many of you would be willing to surrender your control? Raise your hand. One person in the whole room. Brave man. I like that. He's willing to vote against the crowd. Good for him. But one out of several dozen. Okay? Whoops. Sorry, I went too far. What about tech fails? We know the Tesla situation, but there are other tech fails, particularly with fully automation. Again, going back to the reliability issue is a problem, but if it's fully automated, the question really is okay, is that automation solid? We know that the programming in Pittsburgh could recognize a parked vehicle facing it, so it stopped. What kind of programming is going to be required to really get so good that humans will accept it? And why haven't we learned from the airline industry? Again, Dr. Cummings again provided really nice examples from the airline industry and automation. And the compliance of pilots have led to crashes, misreading, and many of us in this room know that people can't go from unattentive to attentive, boom. There is this basically blindness lag we have to overcome, and there's a more technical term for that. But we have some time we have to take to get back into awareness of what's happening, take controls, and make the decision. By that time we've hit the mountain if we're a pilot, okay? We've also had pilots so distracted with autopilot, they miss their airport and keep flying and end up several cities away before they realize what happened. So these things happen. And again, humans build and program the tech. Now let's talk about something people aren't talking about as much. How many of you have heard of the ethics argument in self-driving? 3 of you, 4 or 5 of you. The rest of you are just too shy and not awake yet, hiding behind the pillars. Okay, very good. Well, you know what? It's a social dilemma. And the research on this is very interesting. People want self-driving vehicles for everybody else but themselves. They're worried about everybody else but themselves. People want the government, and of course there are people that argue, all right, if the self-driving is going to work and the technology is going to work, you've got to mandate it. You can't make it optional. So let's mandate it for everybody. Well, people are in favor of that too, until it's a car they have to buy that's mandated. They would rather buy a car they can take control over, and everybody else, all the other fools on the road, they have to be governed by everybody else, but not them. So social dilemma. We want the best for the common good, but nah, not when we're involved, thank you. We don't want to go down that road. That hasn't been solved. Of course, there's other things too. And you could read up there. Also, people don't particularly want it to be enforced. So will a police officer be able to do something to your car? No, they'd rather not, but again, everybody else. So everything is about other people but not themselves. But let's talk about maybe the more sinister algorithm questions. The moral argument. Who do you want sitting in a room that's going to decide whether your car saves your life by hitting a pedestrian? Or who's going to decide you're going to die because we're going to take the tree over hitting that group of children? Those are all decisions that a fully automated self-driving vehicle is going to have to do, and you will not have a say in if it's fully automated self-driving. Who do you want making those decisions? And again, I go back to the cultural argument. Which culture are we going to use? Whose norms are we going to use? Whose laws are we going to use? Those are real questions. You don't hear those from Google. You don't hear those from Uber. You don't hear those from any other company wishing to use that, not as much as safety, which is what the number one argument always is about. Humans are bad, and mobility. They don't like to talk about, yes, we're going to decide who lives and dies. So finally, in the minute or so I have left, I think, or maybe I'm out of time, David, where does this leave us? And this is a wonderful cartoon from the Oatmeal, which is a great cartoonist I read for Running Magazine and so forth. You know, a car deciding the pedestrian, so the conversation, the pedestrian, the car, you go first, no, you go first, no, you go first, no, you go first, and they can't make a decision, and the car finally says, let's just sit here and reflect. All right? So these are the things, my last slide. We have to fix the basic technology issues. We have to look at really what's causing the crashes. It's not just the human in a vacuum. Cybersecurity, I wish I had more time to talk about that. We know GPS units can be jammed. These cars require GPS. So if we can jam GPS, and national security is interested in this, what does that mean? Economic impacts, of course, the savings and the losses they're not talking about. And finally, I've said this multiple times, I just had to put it in writing, traffic safety culture. It's a huge issue right now, and governing safety on the roadways, that is not being discussed, not at all, in the national conversation on self-driving. That's a huge player in whether we live or die when we get in our cars and go home. Thank you for your indulgence for the extra minute or so. I appreciate it very much. If there are any time for questions, comments, great. If not, I'd love to turn it over to my other colleagues.
Well, I think with that, we have to allow at least one question.
Yes?
What was the last thing? What does near infinite mean?
Let me go back, or try to go back. Make sure I put this in context.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, okay. His question for me was near infinite. Oh, okay. So the gentleman's question is, what I mean by near infinite? So can you program for the near infinite? Can you program for nearly every infinite case example of a cultural norm? Norms and cultures evolve over time in driving. So how are these algorithms going to predict all those changes, adapt all those changes, account for all those cultures? That's the biggest thing. We often think of self-driving as a one-size-fits-all, the algorithm, boom, that's all you need. And there are an infinite number of ways that you can program a car to act in our social environment. Infinite number. Who's going to make that decision? Who's going to keep up? That's what I meant. Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Dr. Porter.
Thank you.